crazy ex, who I've had a restraining order against, gets my sister pregnant and then proposed to her and made her demand that I drop the restraining order to be able to attend their wedding. On the day of her wedding, I get a call from sis blaming me for destroying her marriage because this happened. I know this story will sound crazy, but please bear with me. A few years ago, I was in a relationship with someone who ended up being one of the worst things that ever happened to me. Looking back now, I can honestly say he almost destroyed me mentally, emotionally, and even the way I saw myself. He wasn't just a bad boyfriend, and he was like a wolf in sheep's clothing, pretending to be someone kind and trustworthy when in reality he was anything but. We met when I was only 17, still basically a kid just starting to figure out life and love. He, on the other hand, was already 23, an adult, at least by age. I know how that sounds now, and yeah, it raises all kinds of red flags. I wish someone had pulled me aside back then and said, "Hey, this isn't normal. A grown man dating a teenage girl who's never even had a proper relationship. That's not okay." But at the time, I didn't see any of that. To me, he seemed perfect. He knew all the right things to say, and he carried himself like someone who had it all together. He talked with this confidence that made him seem so mature, like he really understood the world. And by comparison, I felt small but also lucky. I thought I had someone older and wiser who cared about me. I was totally wrapped up in it. I thought it was love. I really did. Things between us really started falling apart when I got accepted into a really good university. It should have been a happy moment, something to celebrate. But instead of being proud of me or supportive, my ex started acting distant and even a little hostile. He didn't like it at all that I was going away to college. I could tell part of it, I think, was that he had dropped out of school himself, so me getting into a top university made him feel insecure or maybe even threatened. He also had this idea in his head that I should follow his lead and not bother with higher education like he did. But thankfully my parents always drilled it into me that education is important no matter what. From a young age they made sure I understood that getting a degree was non-negotiable. And honestly, I've always been one of those students who worked hard, took pride in my grades, and enjoyed learning. So despite his disapproval, I went anyway. But once I got to campus, things only got worse. He would drive over and visit me every single weekend. At first, I thought maybe he missed me and wanted to stay connected, but it quickly became clear that wasn't it. Almost every time he came, we ended up fighting. He'd pick on me, guilt-trip me, or say something to tear me down and make me feel bad about myself. More often than not, I'd end up crying by the time he left. It got to a point where it felt like I couldn't breathe without him getting upset. If I had any male friends, literally, even if a guy just talked to me in class or invited me to a party, he would lose it. He'd start questioning me, accusing me, twisting things in his head, and making it seem like I was doing something wrong just by existing around other men. It didn't stop there, though. Even when I hung out with my female friends, he would still have a problem with it, especially if he wasn't there to watch what was going on. It was like he couldn't stand the idea of me having a life that didn't revolve around him. If I wanted to go out and have fun, like go to a party or grab drinks with friends, he would make me feel so guilty about it. He'd act like I was being wild or irresponsible, when really I was just trying to enjoy my college years like anyone else. He always made me feel like I was doing something wrong, even when I wasn't. And when he got angry, really angry, he would say things that cut deep. I won't even repeat some of the names he would call me because they're just too awful. But they stuck with me. He made me feel small, worthless, like I didn't deserve better. He'd break me down with his words and then act like he was the only one who truly cared about me. My roommates saw all of this. They saw how every time he came around, I changed. I went from happy and outgoing to quiet, on edge, sometimes even crying behind closed doors. They were always trying to talk sense into me. They didn't like him and they weren't shy about it either. They begged me to leave him. They said I deserved better, that I wasn't myself anymore. And they were right. I just couldn't see it clearly at the time. I wish more than anything I had listened to them. But I didn't. I was so deeply, blindly in love with my ex at the time. I really thought he could change. I held on to this hope that one day he'd become the guy he pretended to be in the beginning. I kept thinking maybe if I love him enough, he'll finally see how much he's hurting me and stop. But that day never came. What made everything even more confusing and honestly so much harder to walk away from were the good days. Because when things were good, they were really good. He could be the most charming, thoughtful, caring boyfriend. He knew all my favorite things and he paid attention to the little details. He'd surprise me with my favorite flowers, plan sweet dates, and for a short while it would feel like we were just perfectly in love. We'd laugh, we'd talk for hours, and I honestly felt like I could open up to him about anything. On those days, he was warm and attentive, and I think this is the guy I fell for. This is why I stayed. It gave me this hope that maybe the good version of him would stick around if I just tried hard enough, loved him deeply enough, or avoided doing things that made him upset. But then the bad days would come. If he was having a rough day, it didn't matter what I did, I was going down with him. He would always take it out on me like it was my job to absorb all his pain and anger. He would start fights over the smallest, most random things. Sometimes I didn't even know what triggered it. One second things would be fine and the next it felt like I was being emotionally ambushed. He'd twist my words, turn everything around on me, make me question my own reality. And that's when the gaslighting would start. He'd say things didn't happen the way I remembered or claim I was being too sensitive or crazy when I tried to stand up for myself. He'd make me feel like everything was my fault, even his bad behavior. I'd end up second-guessing myself constantly and apologize to him even if it wasn't my fault. Some nights were so bad I would break down completely in front of him. I'd be crying so hard I couldn't breathe, caught in these panic attacks where my whole body would shake. And through it all, he just watched me fall apart, sometimes with cold silence and anger, never comforting me or even acknowledging the damage he was doing. Graduating from college should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. I had worked so hard for it, staying up late, studying nonstop, juggling everything despite my on and off relationship with my ex just to make it through. And when I finally got that degree and landed a really good job straight out of school, I was proud of myself. But instead of celebrating with me, my ex was furious. He didn't even congratulate me. Not a word, not a text, not a call. I remember sitting there on my graduation day, surrounded by friends and family, trying to stay in the moment. But deep down, I was just waiting for him to show that he cared. I kept checking my phone, hoping he'd call and say, "I'm proud of you," or, "You did it." But nothing. He just ignored me like I didn't exist. Like something that huge in my life didn't even matter to him. And when he found out that the job I got was in another city, everything blew up. He completely lost it. He started yelling, accusing me of trying to abandon him. He screamed that this was all just some plan I've been cooking up to run away and leave him behind in my hometown. Like me, working hard, building a life for myself was some personal attack on him. I tried to explain. I told him that this opportunity had nothing to do with him. It was just the best option for me, for my future. The new city had more opportunities, a better salary, and the chance to grow in ways I never could if I stayed. But it didn't matter to him. He couldn't see past his own insecurity and resentment. And then he gave me an ultimatum. He actually told me, "It's either your job or me." Like he expected me to throw away everything I had worked for just to keep him happy. It was one of the most manipulative things he'd ever done. He wanted me to shrink myself, to give up on my dreams once again, just so he wouldn't feel left behind. This is when I finally put my foot down. After everything I had put up with, the emotional roller coaster, the constant guilt, the crying, the fights, I had just had enough. I had finally reached my breaking point. For the first time, I stopped trying to explain myself. I stopped trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix. I told him straight up that I had worked way too hard for my degree and I had just landed a high-paying job that could open so many doors for my future. I couldn't afford to throw that away. Not for anyone and especially not for someone who had never supported me to begin with. I told him that as much as I loved him, I was ready to break up with him rather than give up my job. When he realized I wasn't backing down this time, his whole attitude flipped. The anger disappeared and suddenly he was in tears, sobbing, begging me not to leave him. It was like watching someone put on a different mask. He went from threatening to heartbroken in a few seconds. He told me he couldn't live without me and that he would change and that he just needed one more chance. But I didn't feel moved by his words because in that moment I saw it for what it was. Just another tactic, another way to manipulate me into staying. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't the same 17-year-old who fell for the sweet words and empty promises. I needed to be a grown-up and take care of myself first. So, I looked at him crying and begging and told him calmly that maybe breaking up was the best thing for both of us. That we clearly weren't compatible and it was time we stopped pretending we were. I said goodbye to him and left. And for the first time in years, I felt free. I honestly believe that God finally showed me a way out, a better way to live, a chance to start over, and I took it. When I moved to the new city, I was ready to start over. I thought putting physical distance between us would be enough and that he'd finally let go and I could start fresh. I was ready to focus on my career, settle into a new routine, and begin the kind of life I had always dreamed of, the one he constantly held me back from. But I was wrong. He wasn't done with me yet. It started one afternoon just a few weeks after I had started my new job. I remember finishing up my job and just as I left my workplace, I noticed him standing outside waiting for me. My heart dropped. He looked disheveled, possibly drunk. And from the look in his eyes, I could tell this wasn't some sweet surprise reunion. He hadn't come to talk. He had clearly come to cause a scene. I was terrified. My hands started shaking. All those feelings I thought I had left behind, fear, anxiety, dread, they came rushing back in an instant. I knew I couldn't let my coworkers see my ex. I had just started this job. I couldn't afford to have my personal life spill into my professional space like that. So, I quickly and quietly went to the security team in the building. I asked them to remove him from the premises, but I made sure they didn't tell him it was me who asked. I knew if he found out, he'd explode right then and there. Thankfully, the security guards handled it calmly but firmly. My ex tried to resist, of course. He shouted, argued, and even tried to shove them a bit, but eventually they managed to get him out of the building. I stayed behind a corner the whole time, just listening, barely breathing, praying it wouldn't get worse. After that, I was able to go back home peacefully and thought that my ex would not bother me again. However, over the following weeks, he continued to show up unexpectedly. On 3 or 4 occasions, he even caught me as I was leaving the building. He'd start yelling, accusing me of being an a-hole for using him all those years and then dumping him once I'd gotten what I wanted. I tried to respond calmly, explaining that wasn't true and that he needed to move on and find someone more like him. But that only seemed to make him angrier. Every encounter drained me. I would go home shaken, exhausted, and anxious. I didn't feel safe walking out of work anymore. I started looking over my shoulder all the time. And still, part of me kept hoping he'd stop, that eventually he'd just let it go and disappear for good. One day, my ex followed me back home and attempted to break into my place. I barely managed to lock the door in time and call the police. I was terrified, my hands numb, but somehow I got the words out. Thankfully, the police arrived just in time. When they searched him, they found a knife hidden in his back pocket. I don't even want to imagine what might have happened to me that night. The detail still haunts me. I keep thinking, what if I hadn't been quick enough? What if the door hadn't been locked? He was arrested on the spot and eventually sentenced to a year in jail. Afterwards, I was able to get a restraining order, which gave me some peace of mind, but the fear didn't just vanish overnight. My whole family knows what I went through. My sister was actually one of the people who supported me the most at the time. She told me how scary it was and how awful it must have been to have someone who once claimed to love me become someone I had to hide from. She understood, or at least I thought she did, how traumatizing it was to be stalked like that for months after our breakup. So, you can imagine my shock when my sister just informed us that she is dating my ex. It all started with her first inviting me and my parents over for lunch at her place and then out of nowhere dropping the bombshell that she was pregnant. We were all stunned. None of us even knew she was seeing anyone. But then she casually mentioned that her boyfriend was coming over too, so we could meet him. My parents and I were curious but excited to meet her mystery man. And in walked my ex. I swear I froze like a deer caught in headlights. He had this huge grin on his face, looking all confident and smug like he owned the place. All I could see was the guy who had stalked me for months. The same person who had once made me feel unsafe in my own home. Now here he was walking in and hugging my sister. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was left speechless, completely stumped. How could this be happening? How could my sister be with him after everything? It was beyond anything I could have imagined. My parents were just as shocked as I was. My dad furiously demanded an explanation from my sister, and that's when she nervously revealed that she and my ex had connected on Instagram earlier this year. She said that knowing my history with him, she became curious to understand him better, to figure out why he had done what he did to me. She went on to explain that over the months, the more they talked, the more she felt like he could understand her soul. And then she turned to me and tried to justify his action, saying that he was not a stalker, but actually a big sweetheart, and that he didn't really mean any harm when he broke into my house that day. She clarified that he had been very much in love with me and just couldn't handle his emotions. Back then, I stared at her in disbelief, like she had completely lost her mind. How could she possibly defend him? I was the one who had suffered through it all, not her. It was like she had completely forgotten the terrifying reality of those months. All the same excuses for someone who had violated my safety. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. My sister kept going as if nothing about this situation was strange at all. She told us that my ex, after going to jail, had turned his life around through therapy and meditation. Apparently, he had come to realize his mistakes and was now a changed man. She emphasized how they both had fallen in love and were really happy about the pregnancy. As she spoke, my ex sat there smiling smugly and holding her hand. He had no remorse or shame on his face. He just sat there playing the loving partner. My sister continued saying that although she knew how much we hated him for everything that happened, she wanted us to get over it and try to accept him now. After all, she was going to have a child with him, and she didn't want her baby to ever find out about his father's past. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was as though she was asking me to just forget everything I went through. I couldn't believe she was so willing to rewrite the past and dismiss the trauma I experienced. Not only had my sister willingly hooked up with my stalker, but she was now defending his actions and justifying him as if what he did to me was just some silly mistake. I couldn't hold back anymore and ended up yelling at her about how much of a betrayal this was and how I had a restraining order against this guy. So, he had no right to be anywhere near me, as I didn't even want to see his face. At this, my sister argued back that I was being selfish and inconsiderate for not supporting her and her partner, and I was welcome to get out of her house as she wanted him there regardless of my feelings. I felt so disgusted by her that I couldn't bring myself to argue with her anymore. I just stood up prepared to walk out. As soon as I was heading for the door, my ex immediately got up and tried to block me. He then started with his apologies, saying how sorry he was for everything he'd done to me and that he hoped I could forgive and move on from the incident for the sake of my sister and their future baby. But before I could say anything, my dad stepped in furious. He didn't let my ex get another word out and finally told him to step aside. My mom wasn't holding back either. She turned to my sister and with an icy tone declared that all of us were appalled by her betrayal. She told my sister that if she had truly made up her mind about being with my ex, then we were all done with her. That was it. After that, without saying another word, the three of us walked out, leaving my sister and my ex. That night, my sister called me crying hysterically. She said I had ruined her special lunch and that all her happiness about her pregnancy had been taken away because I made it all about me by walking out. The guilt she tried to make me feel was overwhelming, but I tried to stay calm. I explained to her as carefully as I could how crazy I thought it was that she was even in this situation, that she had forgiven someone who had caused me so much pain and now was involving him in her life like nothing had happened. But she wouldn't listen. She refused to see it the way I did. Instead, she told me that after all this time, I was blowing things out of proportion and that my ex had already been punished enough, that he had paid for his mistakes and it was time for me to get over it also. So, Ida for refusing to forgive my stalker? Update 1. So, I haven't talked to my sister since our last conversation. I am thinking of going low contact with her as I still can't wrap my head around the fact that she is dating my stalker. For everyone asking how much younger my sister is than me, she's 3 years younger. Yes, my ex did meet her over the years and it disgusts me that she's now dating him. It feels like not only did he do this to piss me off, but it also seems pretty clear that he's only interested in younger women. It's sickening to think about. And honestly, it just makes everything worse. Some people in the comments here have suggested I should try to forgive my ex and move on for my own mental health. I get what you're coming from and I know forgiveness can be freeing, but I can't just forget what happened. I spent months terrified, trying to feel safe in my own home, and that's not something I can just let go of. With my sister now dating him and having a baby with him, it feels like I'm being forced to accept him because she's happy now and I'm expected to just swallow everything I've been through. It's hard to find peace when I'm being gaslighted into thinking I'm the problem. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update. Last week, my sister announced her engagement to my ex on her socials. I found out after some of our mutual friends started calling me as they were all shocked. Apparently, my sister has told everyone that she is very happy and excited to start a new chapter by marrying the love of her life. Anyways, this week my sister called me 8 times and sent a message saying it was an emergency. By the time she called for the 9th time, I finally answered, thinking it was a real emergency, but it turned out that she was calling to invite me to her wedding. Apparently, she and my ex are having a quick marriage at the courthouse. I was completely shocked by her audacity and told her that this was absolutely not an emergency and that I had no interest in attending her wedding. She started tearing up, telling me how none of our family members, including my parents and cousins, were going to be there as they had all taken my side instead of hers. She pointed out that as a pregnant hormonal woman, she was feeling completely isolated. She pleaded with me, saying that I should be there for her as her sister and then mentioned that even my ex wanted me there, too. I couldn't help but scoff at this. Of course, he wanted me there. That crazy psycho probably wanted to rub it in my face that he was marrying my baby sister despite the fact that he stalked me for months. I pointed out to my sister that I couldn't care less if she felt lonely on her wedding day. This was her own decision to marry someone like him. Despite the fact that the entire family disapproved, she chose him. And now she had to deal with the consequences. And on top of everything, I had a restraining order against him. So there was no way in hell I was going to willingly attend their wedding or be anywhere near him. That's when my sister hit me with something even more outrageous. She said that I could always drop the restraining order against my ex as he wasn't a threat to me anymore. She said he also thought it was time that I let go so that he can start their marriage with a clean slate. It was clear the idea didn't come from her. My ex wanted it too. She insisted that she didn't want anything else from me and that dropping the restraining order and showing up for her on her big day would be the perfect wedding gift. I couldn't help but laugh at her ridiculous suggestion. And I told her straight up that I wasn't going to do any of that, no matter how much she begged or pleaded. I wasn't going to sacrifice my safety or my peace just to make her happy. I didn't trust that psycho at all. Hearing this, she started crying, but I ended the call immediately. I'm just tired of her shenanigans. Update 3. Hello everyone. I'm back. Today was supposed to be my sister's wedding day, but things haven't turned out well. Earlier today, I got a call from my sister. She was hysterical, sobbing, screaming at me, blaming me for destroying her marriage before it even began. I was taken aback and asked her what was going on. Turns out the groom, my ex, completely ghosted her. He never showed up at the courthouse. His phone was off and she waited and waited for hours thinking maybe he was running late or there was a mix-up, but he just never came. Later, he sent her a short text saying that he didn't think they were right for each other after all, and that it just didn't feel right getting married when no one from either of their families supported it, especially me. Apparently, the lack of family presence made him question everything and he bailed at the last minute, leaving my sister alone, humiliated, and pregnant. So now my sister, instead of being pissed at him, is blaming me for all of it, saying if I had just dropped the restraining order and come to the wedding, he might have gone through with it. I told her that she really needed to take a look at herself in the mirror because none of this was on me. I sure as hell didn't abandon her at the altar. That was his doing, not mine. She made her choice when she decided to ignore everything he had done to me, everything he was, and tried to build a life with him anyway. She thought love would magically erase the past or that if she stood by him hard enough, he'd turn into someone better. But that's not how it works. You don't redeem a monster just by loving it harder. Honestly, I think this was always going to happen. He was never a stable person and she ignored every red flag. I wish I could say I was shocked, but I'm not. And as much as it hurts to see her this broken, I'm done being her emotional punching bag. She made her bed. Now she has to lie in it.